I'm here with Mr. John Smith, who teaches maths A-level, mainly mathematics at A-level, further maths, and so on. Actually, in fact, Mr. Smith recently has been teaching some further maths GCSE as well, but his specialty is A-level maths. So, good morning, John. If you just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, I've been teaching maths for more years than I can care to remember. As you know, I've been with your company for, I think this is my 5th year, perhaps.
Yes, you're right.
I have taught in England, of course. I've also taught in different countries, Oman, the United Arab Emirates, and the USA. I was teaching at a school in the middle of Manhattan. And my degree originally was from Oxford University, where I got my bachelor's and master's, and then I did a year of research, and I entered teaching pretty much by accident. Something happened to a local school and they were desperate for a maths teacher, and I said I would help them out, and I loved it so much I just stayed in that profession.
Wow, such a natural. Yes, that's excellent. Pretty impressive. So yes, you have been with excelling case subject for the last we're entering the 6th year, I believe now. If you could just tell us, in terms of your day-to-day teaching experience here, just tell us a little bit about that, your day-to-day teaching experience at excelling case subject.
Yes. The groups are small, and that's the policy of the company. The largest group I've ever taught is a group of 6 students, but usually it's less than that. But even if there are 3 or 4 students, they come from different backgrounds, they come from different schools, and often they have different ability levels. And so I enjoy catering for all their needs. And I work, I would describe it as collaboratively with them, that we decide what we're going to do, which topics and in which particular order. And they typically, if I'm introducing a new topic, I'll chat about it in general, using perhaps the board, the whiteboard a little bit. Then I will formalize it, and we do some examples, and then they do some practice on their own. And then, of course, each week I give them a worksheet with homework questions, which I collect in the following week.
Okay, good. In terms of your experience of teaching on a Saturday, can you just tell us what do you think the students actually get from the session at Excel on a Saturday, which they don't get from their regular school?
Well, very often in my experience here, most, if not all, the students have some areas where, for whatever reason, they haven't understood at all, or they haven't fully understood certain topics, certain concepts in the subject. And the setting of a small group, which I've already mentioned, makes it very easy to address their concerns on a one-to-one basis. And I find students are they feel much more comfortable in asking questions and entering into a debate, sometimes that happens, which they very often don't do at school.
I suppose the class size matters.
It certainly does. And this doesn't sound too conceited. I do believe I have whatever talents I don't have, I certainly have a talent, I think, for listening to their concerns and finding a way of explaining it that helps them, rather than just relying on one approach.
Okay,
and I think that's what they really get from it.
Excellent. Right, Mr. Smith, the next question is, we at Excel in Case Subject provide Saturday classes which is just 2 hours of teaching A-level every week on a Saturday. I mean, do you think students, young people receiving tuition for 2 hours on a Saturday in a small group, do you think it's actually can be effective or helpful to them?
Yes, I think there's no doubt. I think 2 hours for A-level is an ideal length of time for each session. Sometimes I offer the students a 5-minute break halfway through. Believe it or not, sometimes they say, no, let's carry on.
Wow. Must be doing something right.
And over the full academic year, it gives us a chance to visit all the subjects on the syllabus. That's including the pure maths and the obligatory mechanics and statistics. And in addition to that, for the last at least three, if not more weeks, 3 or 4 weeks, before their actual exams, to concentrate on previous examination papers, which is so important for them to grade the best possible grade.
Oh, excellent. If I may ask, can you point to 2, 3 or 5, 2 or 3 will be sufficient in terms of what difference do you think the Saturday classes made, or the benefit, the main 2 or 3 main benefits that you think young people get from actually coming to the Saturday classes?
One thing that I think is essential for any student to perform well in mathematics is that they have confidence in their ability. And with the setting, the Saturday sessions, everybody works together and they're all in the same position, and they find that as the weeks go on, they are obtaining more success or encountering more success in terms of solving problems, and that feeds their confidence, and it's an upward spiral.
So confidence is number one.
Confidence, I think, is hugely important. The chance to ask me or about certain topics which they're really not too sure about. I've had several students in statistics, for example, saying, you know what, I can actually usually manage to get the correct answer, but I don't really know what I'm doing. Can you tell me what the background is? And that's the sort of question, very, very excellent question, that they feel it's very difficult for them to ask in the school setting. And as I think I've mentioned, the individualized basis of either the students asking me about particular topics, or when I'm on their homework, or indeed when I'm just working with them in the class, I can see, I can diagnose where their weaknesses are without them telling me, and therefore I can address them directly.
Okay, excellent. So those are 2 main things: the fact that their confidence is built, and the fact that they get to ask individual help. Okay, excellent. Thank you. Now, again, I'm sort of following up on that. Well, actually, what do you think in terms of for A-level maths? What will you pinpoint if you were to mention, say, 2 or 3 or more challenges, the main challenges that young people face when studying A-level maths?
Well, when one is studying A-level maths, there are different phases, if you will. There's prerequisites in terms of being able to manipulate mathematics, particularly algebra, but not just algebra, which of course stems back to their GCSE years and even beyond that. It's not that unusual for me to discern the reason for a particular student's difficulty is not actually the new work itself, but it goes right back into as I said, the basic algebra, which they would have covered in GCSE, and that's fine. We can address that. Then, of course, there's the understanding of the new concepts. Calculus is an obvious one that they haven't seen before. The understanding, which comes from my explanation.
Yes.
And then, of course, the fact the ability to use that understanding together with the practicalities of mathematics in order to actually succeed in solving the sort of problems that they'll encounter in the A-level examination.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Yes, Mr. Smith, mathematics is apparently a very important, well, in my view, probably the most useful of A-level. Now, people have different, I suppose, talent or ability. Some people find mathematics second nature, but many young people do not. In terms of the approach to enable the young person to get the grade, do you think there ought to be a different approach from a less mathematically able young person in comparison to somebody who is very, very smart mathematically?
I don't think there should be a radically different approach. I think what tends to happen is that the less mathematically able need different things from my teaching, in particular perhaps alternative explanations, where perhaps the brighter or the more able mathematicians grasp the new concept the first time round. But that doesn't mean to say if I explain a topic 2 or even 3 different ways, that doesn't mean that the more able students are wasting their time, because they will grasp other facets of that particular topic from the alternative explanations. And they will often see interconnections between different topics, which are not really apparent to the less able, and that in turn enriches their mathematical experience. So the same teaching, if you will, can be taken on several different levels, a little bit like reading a novel. You can read it superficially but get a lot out of it, or you can actually see things inside which other people might not see unless they've read it 3 or 4 times.
Yes.
I hope that makes sense.
Yes, I would understand. So yeah, thank you. John, I remember it was a couple of years ago or so at one of our intensive revision courses during Christmas or Easter, I can't quite remember, what at UCL. And it was a 20-hour course for which we do maths for 7 hours a day for 3 days. And I remember normally our promised number of students that we promise parents, which we usually stick to, is 6 students per class. But there was one situation in which somehow we ended up with about 9 of them because of misbooking or what have you. And we have 2 students from 2 different end of the spectrum in terms of, I remember a couple of students who are doing further maths actually. And on the other hand, we also have a couple that are quite weak, but somehow they both benefited from it. How did you manage that?
I remember the occasion. I think it was Christmas actually. What made things perhaps a little bit difficult was that because it was an intensive, most, if not all of the students were not our regular Saturday students. There might have been 1 or 2. But the other, let's say 7 students, I didn't know at all. They were just names on a piece of paper. And we don't ask for, as you know, we don't ask for reports from the school. They haven't had a diagnostic test, not for the intensives. And so, I have no idea how good or how able, how less able students are. But one can pick these things up very quickly. And I tried, and I hope I succeeded, in teaching at a level where the more able ones, particularly the two you mentioned, doing A-level further maths, they were able to gain from what I was saying, and the weak ones, there were at least two quite weak ones, and they didn't understand all the import of what I was saying, but for what they needed, which was a basic understanding of each
To
topic.
get a C grade or whatever they.
Well, yes, whatever. It's funny, you know, sometimes a student, particularly on the weaker side, will say, oh, I'm aiming for a C grade. I'll smile and say, no, you're not aiming for a C grade, you're aiming for an A star. Let's be realistic, you probably won't get one. You can't aim for a C. But the sort of C/D graders at that time, they got what they wanted from my teaching, and so did the ones at the upper end who were a little bit stretched by what I was saying. So yes, I do remember that, and they, at the end of the 3 days, as you say, 20 hours of maths in three days, I said to them, well, I don't know about you guys, I'm exhausted but happy. Yes, so are we there.
Yes. Excellent. Excellent. Okay. What you've just described in terms of the intensive revision, that everybody was happy at the end, exhausted but happy. Just to bring me to my next question, which is, can you tell us a short story about one of your aha moments when you actually taught a group of students or one student, when they actually bring out the aha moment, the eureka sort of situation?
Well, I mean, there are quite a lot of students who have this sort of moment, and there is no higher compliment can be given to a teacher, particularly I think a mathematics teacher, than a student to say, oh, I never realised it was so simple. And it's not meant as a compliment, it's just an observation, but I think that's what makes it all worthwhile.
Yes.
And I remember a student, I think perhaps you can think who I'm talking about, a young lady,
And many of them.
who was very, very underconfident when she came
I remember.
to us, and I think our school was predicting a D or even an E.
Yeah.
E, I think it was an E, yes. And she was a little bit, I don't say suspicious, but a little bit uneasy about the whole setting, because I think she was a little bit embarrassed because she didn't think she was very good at mathematics.
No.
But we worked together in the context of a group, and she found she was able to actually succeed at a level that she'd never done before,
Yes.
which was wonderful. And the more she got right, the more her confidence grew.
Yes.
And I remember she came in one morning just before, maybe half an hour before our lesson started, and I was in the reception. So she said, oh, good morning, Mrs. Smith. Do you remember teaching us that method in integration as part of calculus that we did 2 weeks ago? And I said, yes, of course. She said, well, we were just doing it at school, and none of my friends in the group could understand what was going on at all. So I explained your method
To
and
them.
they could not do it.
Yes.
And for this young lady to be able to do that
Yes.
was just amazing.
Yes.
And she ended up with a very creditable grade B.
A grade B, yes. Actually, maths was our best grade at A
It's the
level.
best result.
And this is on top of the fact that she has some medical issues, some
Yes,
quite
indeed,
serious
indeed,
medical
indeed.
issue, which the parent decided that she shouldn't have a surgery, which it's something that she should have. That happened in the middle of our A level. Yes, and yes, I remember very well this young lady. So yeah, that was excellent. So yeah, thank you very much for telling Mr. Smith. If I may ask you, do you have 3 to 5 tips that you think will help a teenager who is studying A-level mathematics to achieve their full potential in the subject?
Okay. Probably the most important, whether the student is seemingly has a higher level of ability or not, it is so important for each student to face up to his or her difficulties honestly, rather than to be in denial about it. I've come across students who sometimes say, well, I couldn't do that homework, but I think I understand it now and it'll be okay next time. You have to be honest about your difficulties, even if they seem quite minor. That leads into ideally asking your teacher, whether it's here at Excellent Key Subjects or at school, ideally to ask, you know, I don't quite understand this or that. A good teacher will be able to identify weaknesses, but it's so much easier and more effective if the student can say, this is something I don't really understand fully. It's important to, week by week, the work that has been covered, again this applies to school as well as Excel, to just have a look through, never mind the homework, that's important of course, but just to have a look through what has actually been covered. Because of course at the end of the day...
That's sort of revise what you've covered, or?
Yes, so that in 2 months' time, hopefully, when that topic surfaces again, you won't think, oh, I can't remember that, I vaguely remember doing it. Keep abreast of what we have been doing. And to practice, yes, there's homework, but especially as the exams we need to get nearer to the exams, do your own practice. There are plenty of resources online, and of course there's the textbook questions. Almost certainly you won't have answered all the textbook questions at school, and so try some more yourself. Practice is hugely important, and of course when you get really near to the examinations themselves, by which stage you will have covered all the syllabus, to practice in particular previous examination papers, to acquaint yourself with the style of questions. I personally use quite often previous examination questions when I'm doing particular topics. When you see an examination paper where the topics can come in a random order, from question 1, and we did it 3 weeks ago, question 2, oh that was last year, etc., to help identify what is the topic that this question is all about, and as I say, the style of questions in your own particular exam board. 5 tips for success for students in A-level mathematics. Very importantly, face up to your difficulties, don't be in denial about them. Review constantly the work that you're doing, let's say on a weekly basis, rather than just saying, oh, that's another topic out of the way. Practice, almost certainly be given homework assignments, and that itself counts as practice, but do more than that, especially as you go through the year and you get towards the end of the academic year. Find questions either online, or there'll be certain questions in the textbook that you have which you won't have done before. And building on that, the nearer you get to the examination itself, make sure that your practice involves a lot of previous examination papers, so that you become acquainted with the style of them. And finally, when you do practice on questions, which will usually be your official homework assignments, do make sure that you read or listen to the feedback from your teacher, especially where things perhaps have gone wrong, and act upon that feedback. Don't just think, okay, I didn't do so badly, I got 90%. Even that, see where you've gone wrong and see what the feedback is and act upon it.
Right, Mr. Smith, do you think there ought to be a minimum grade that a student achieve at GCSE before considering doing A-level mathematics?
Yes, I think inevitably, if one can't achieve a reasonable mastery of GCSE work, it's extremely unlikely that you'll be able to succeed at A-level. I would suggest that the very, very minimum will be grade 6, but even that is questionable. I think a 7 or above is what I would suggest for students who are intending doing A-level maths. And if you're intending doing A-level further maths, I would say at least an 8 or a 9. That's what my view would be.
Thank you, that's excellent. Two main programs for A-level students. There are two main options. The first one, which is our bread and butter, which is very common, is a 2-hour lesson in maths every Saturday. Yeah. In fact, there are 26 Saturdays a year. And the second program is a 20-hour program. We call it the intensive revision. It's a 20-hour course. There are 20 hours spread over 3 days. Mr. Smith, can you try to compare and contrast the benefit of each of these two programs?
Yes, certainly. For the Saturday, the regular Saturday 2-hour sessions spread through the year, that gives students a constant drip feed, if you will, of explanations, building confidence and practice. And the intensive revision, and as they say, the clue's in the title, it is very intensive. That is a sort of almost like a boot camp for A-level maths. The students are reminded of just about all the topics that they've done so far in this short 3-day period. It's particularly useful for those who perhaps have extracurricular activities on Saturdays, but it's also useful. We have several of our own Saturday students who also attend the intensive courses. Those who attend the intensive revision courses from outside, I've known several students in the past who have enjoyed the experience so much that they subsequently joined the Saturday classes. So Saturday is a constant, very, very valuable constant, as I say, injection or drip feed of explanations and useful techniques throughout the year, and the intensives are, I won't say emergency treatment exactly, but the intensives serve their own purpose by going through the entire syllabus in a very short time.
Smith, can you just tell me, why do you enjoy teaching mathematics so much?
I never had an ambition to be a teacher. I loved mathematics, and I did my degree at Oxford in mathematics, and I proceeded to do some research. I had no ambitions to be a teacher at all until when I was preparing my options for a career. The local grammar school where I used to live had an emergency. They needed desperately someone to teach mathematics, and I offered to help them out. They accepted my offer, And probably within a month, I realised that I really just enjoyed the whole aspect of teaching mathematics. I'm the sort of person who loves to explain things, if I'm able to at least. And I even get a kick of walking through the town where I live and having people coming up asking directions to a certain place, and I love that because I just enjoy being able to explain how they get to their destination. Mathematics itself was clearly my favourite academic subject, and there are complexities which are innate in mathematics, which I think possibly are not. They don't exist in other academic subjects. If I were to take one exception to that, I might mention philosophy. And at its best, mathematics, I think, is a form of philosophy.